Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay. Moving into the next part of the sutta around Anuruddha's 8 qualities of a good being. This one is this Dhamma is for one who is wise, not for one who is unwise. Number 7. When it was said, this Dhamma is for one who is wise, not for one who is unwise, with reference to what was this said? Here a bhikkhu is wise. He possesses the wisdom that discerns arising and passing away, which is noble and penetrative and leads to the complete destruction of suffering. When it was said, this Dhamma is for one who is wise, not for one who is unwise, it is with reference to this that this was said. So I thought I'd do a few little bit of explanation type readings. The term wisdom is from Panya, the Pali Panya, and that term has a very broad range of use. And I thought that I'd start with a little bit of that kind of explanation from Buddhadhamma, Payutto's compendium. And it gets a little bit, maybe it could be a little bit dry here with a lot of definition of terms and explanation of terms. And actually some of the uses of the word panya that he goes into here, I don't even know what the Pali might be or what actually is being referred to. Obviously these come from some commentarial sources. So don't question me too closely on these. But I'm just going to read them out just to give you an idea of the range that it involves. This is from the very first part of the book on page 29. It's in the chapter 1 of the 5 aggregates, and subsection number 3, perception, consciousness, and wisdom. Perception, sanya, consciousness, vijnana, and wisdom, panya, are all aspects of knowledge, yet they are part of 3 distinct aggregates. The first 2 factors, described earlier in this chapter, constitute an aggregate in themselves, that's sanya and vijnana, whereas wisdom is classified among the mental formations, sankhara. Wisdom, panya, refers generally to understanding, and more specifically to comprehensive or clear understanding, to a thorough and accurate understanding of the truth. The term panya is defined in many different ways, including knowledge of causality, knowledge of good and evil, knowledge of right and wrong, knowledge of suitability, knowledge of benefit and harm, knowledge of advantages and disadvantages, thorough knowledge of conditioned phenomena, knowledge of constituent factors, knowledge of causes and conditions, knowledge of origin and destination, knowledge of the interrelationship of things, knowledge according to the truth, genuine knowledge, genuine understanding, knowledge of reality, and knowing how to reflect on, contemplate, analyze, and engage with or manage things and situations. Simply speaking, wisdom is clear, correct, and genuine understanding. Wisdom possesses an insight into reality, and it penetrates into the heart of problems. It supports both perception, sanya, and consciousness, vijnana. In regard to the latter, vijnana, it broadens and deepens the range of consciousness. Likewise, in regard to the former, sanya, it increases the range of perception, because the cognition and apprehension of things is dependent on one's knowledge. This is similar to solving mathematical problems. As long as one cannot solve the initial equations, one has no data or criteria for further calculations. With increased understanding, one possesses the markers or raw material for further perception and analysis. Wisdom, panya, stands in opposition to delusion, moha, ignorance, misunderstanding. Whereas perception and consciousness are not contrasted with delusion in this way. Indeed, perception and consciousness may fall prey to delusion. When one is deluded and confused, one's conscious experience and perceptions are equally distorted. Wisdom assists here to rectify both consciousness and perception. Perception and consciousness rely on currently manifesting sense objects in order to function. Images or concepts of these sense objects are thus created and discerned. Wisdom, on the other hand, reflects on sense objects and responds actively to them. Parentheses, wisdom is a deliberative faculty and is thus classified among the volitional formations, sankhara. It links various sense impressions with each other, analyzes their various attributes, compares and considers various perceptions, and discerns cause, effect, interrelationship, and the ways to benefit from things. By doing this, it provides consciousness and perception with wholesome food for engagement. Venerable Sariputta once responded to the question on how wisdom, panya, and consciousness, vijnana, differ. He explained that wisdom knows that this is suffering, this is the cause of suffering, this is the cessation of suffering, and this is the way leading to the end of suffering. Consciousness, on the other hand, knows that this is pleasure, this is pain, and this is neither pleasure nor pain. Wisdom and consciousness, however, are intimately entwined and in a sense inseparable. Having said this, there is a distinction in that wisdom is a quality to be trained and developed. Buddhadhamma, in order to increase and strengthen it. In contrast, consciousness is a quality to be fully understood. Parinyaya Dhamma. Its nature and its attributes should be truly recognized and understood. The commentarial texts, including the Visuddhimagga, explain the distinction between perception, consciousness, and wisdom in this way. Perception simply realizes the properties of a sense object, say that it is green or yellow. It is unable to understand the characteristics of impermanence, dukkha, and non-self. Consciousness, vijnana, also knows the objects of properties, i.e. green, yellow, etc., and it is able to understand the characteristics of impermanence, dukkha, and non-self. But it cannot deliver one to the actualization of the path, i.e., to the realization of the Four Noble Truths. Wisdom, however, accomplishes all three. It knows the properties of sense objects, it discerns the three characteristics, and it enables the actualization of the path. The commentaries use the analogy of three people who look at the same coin. Perception is like a young child who simply discerns the shape of the coin, small, large, square, or round, its color, attractive sheen, and strange markings. He does not know that it is an agreed-upon means of trade and exchange. Consciousness is like an adult who discerns the shape, markings, etc. of the coin, and who knows that it is used for trade and exchange, but he does not possess the deeper understanding of whether the coin is genuine or counterfeit, or of what combination of metals were used to mint the coin. Wisdom is like a treasurer who discerns all of the above data and in addition possesses expert knowledge to the extent that he may look at, tap and listen to, smell, taste, or weigh the coin in his hands and know everything about it, including where and by whom it was made. Moreover, wisdom does not always arise. It may happen that only perception and consciousness arise, devoid of wisdom. Yet when wisdom arises alongside these other two qualities, it is difficult to distinguish one from the other. The term panya is a general term describing the kinds of knowledge mentioned above. There are many different levels of wisdom. For example, mundane wisdom, lokiya panya, and transcendent wisdom, lokuttara panya. There are many other Pali terms indicating specific levels, degrees, or aspects of wisdom, or referring to its specific activities, qualities, or benefits. For example, jnana, knowledge, vijja, true knowledge, vipassana, insight, sampajanya, clear comprehension, parinya, thorough knowledge, abhinya, supreme knowledge, and patisambhida, discriminative knowledge. So there you go. Got it? You won't be tested. Just to, again, not that it's super important to know all of those distinctions as definitions, but just to show the wide range of what the term refers to. So I thought I'd do a few readings also from Ajahn Jeff's book, Discernment, and start with just a bit from the introduction where he discusses the terms and the fact that he translates panya as discernment rather than wisdom, and he gives his reasoning for that here in the introduction. The Pali word for discernment, panya, is often translated as wisdom. However, there are two connected reasons for translating it as discernment instead. The first relates to the place of panya in the Pali language. It's related to the verb pajanati, which refers to the mental act that discerns events and actions, detecting when they are distinct from one another and when they are connected as causes and effects. Pajanati also refers to the act of judging intentions by their effects and discerning subtle phenomena that are ordinarily hard to detect. Although these mental acts contain an element of wisdom, there is no appropriate English verb related to wisdom that covers all of these functions. The English verb discern, however, does cover these functions, and so to keep the connection between the verb and the noun clear, it seems best to translate pajanati as discern and panya as discernment. The second reason for translating panya as discernment relates to its role in the practice. As we will see, the Buddha's strategy for finding true happiness is to focus discernment on the processes of intentional action to determine whether they are skillful, conducive to long-lasting happiness, or not. Part of this strategy, especially at the highest stages of the practice, is to regard discernment itself as an intentional action. This helps you gauge when to foster it and when to abandon it for a higher purpose, total release. Because wisdom is hard to think of as an action, discernment seems to work better in practice as a translation for panya. The Buddha taught that discernment begins by seeking out knowledgeable contemplatives, people who have trained their minds to gain personal experience of the highest happiness, and asking them, what, when I do it, will lead to my long-term welfare and happiness? To do this demonstrates discernment in four important ways. 1, it shows that you know enough to ask the advice of people more experienced than you. 2, you realize that happiness comes from your own actions. 3, you realize that long-term is better than short-term. 4, Above all, you realize that the search for long-term happiness is the most worthy use of your discernment. The search for true happiness is a noble pursuit, and that you need discernment to do it right. So demonstrating that right at the entry to the path, discernment is needed to have you ask the right questions, particularly ones that will gear your practice towards long-term welfare and happiness, not short-term gratification. Then I'm going to just read a few short sutta excerpts. First, let's see here. Yeah. This is under a subsection of sutta references called Ways to Develop Discernment on page 39 of this book. From Digha Nikaya 33, there are 3 types of discernment. Discernment that comes from listening, discernment that comes from thinking, discernment that comes from developing. And this next one is from Anguttara Nikaya's 4.192. And this is regarding trying to discern who might be an appropriate person to study with, to train with, people of integrity and wisdom, discernment. It's through living together that a person's virtue may be known, and then only after a long period, not a short period. By one who is attentive, not by one who is inattentive. By one who is discerning, not by one who is not discerning. Thus it was said. And in reference to what was it said? There is the case where one individual, through living with another, knows this. For a long time, this person has been torn, broken, spotted, splattered in his actions. He hasn't been consistent in his actions. He hasn't practiced consistently with regard to the precepts. He is an unprincipled person, not a virtuous principled one. And then there is the case where one individual, through living with another, knows this. For a long time, this person has been untorn, unbroken, unspotted, unsplattered in his actions. He has been consistent in his actions. He has practiced consistently with regard to the precepts. He is virtuous, principled. He is a virtuous, principled person, not an unprincipled one. It's through living together that a person's virtue may be known, and then only after a long period, not a short period. By one who is attentive, not by one who is inattentive. By one who is discerning, not by one who is not discerning. Thus it was said, and in reference to this was it said. It's through dealing with a person that his purity may be known, and then only after a long period, not a short period, by one who is attentive, not by one who is inattentive, by one who is discerning, not by one who is not discerning. Thus it was said. And in reference to what was it said? There is the case where one individual, through dealing with another, knows this. This person deals one way when one-on-one, another way when with two, another way when with three, another way when with many. His earlier dealings do not jibe with his later dealings. He is impure in his dealings, not pure. And then there is the case where one individual, through dealing with another, knows this. The way this person deals when one-on-one is the same way he deals when with two, when with three, when with many. His earlier dealings jibe with his later dealings. He is pure in his dealings, not impure. It's through dealing with a person that his purity may be known, and then only after a long period, not a short period, by one who is attentive, not by one who is inattentive, by one who is discerning, not by one who is not discerning. Thus it was said, and in reference to this was it said. It's through adversity that a person's endurance may be known, and then only after a long period, not a short period, by one who is attentive, not by one who is inattentive, by one who is discerning, not by one who is not discerning. Thus it was said, and in reference to what was it said? There is the case where a person, suffering loss of relatives, loss of wealth, or loss through disease, doesn't reflect. That's how it is when living together in the world. That's how it is when gaining a personal identity. When there is living in the world, when there is the gaining of a personal identity, these 8 worldly conditions spin after the world, and the world spins after these 8 worldly conditions. Gain, loss, status, disgrace, censure, praise, pleasure, and pain. Suffering loss of relatives, loss of wealth, or loss through disease, he sorrows, grieves, and laments, beats his breast, becomes distraught. And then there is the case where a person suffering loss of relatives, loss of wealth, or loss through disease reflects, that's how it is when living together in the world. That's how it is when gaining a personal identity. When there is living in the world, when there is the gaining of a personal identity, these 8 worldly conditions spin after the world, and the world spins after these worldly 8 conditions. Gain, loss, status, disgrace, censure, praise, pleasure, and pain. Suffering loss of relatives, loss of wealth, or loss through disease, he doesn't sorrow, grieve, or lament, doesn't beat his breast or become distraught. It's through adversity that a person's endurance may be known, and then only after a long period, not a short period, by one who is attentive, not by one who is inattentive, by one who is discerning, not by one who is not discerning. Thus it was said, and in reference to this was it said. It's through discussion that a person's discernment may be known, and then only after a long period, not a short period, by one who is attentive, not by one who is inattentive, by one who is discerning, not by one who is not discerning. And in reference to what was it said? There is the case where one individual, through discussion with another, knows this. From the way this person rises to an issue, from the way he applies his reasoning, from the way he addresses a question, he is dull, not discerning. Why is that? He doesn't make statements that are deep, tranquil, refined, beyond the scope of conjecture, subtle, to be experienced by the wise. He cannot declare the meaning, teach it, describe it, set it forth, reveal it, explain it, or make it plain. He is dull, not discerning. Just as if a man with good eyesight standing on the shore of a body of water were to see a small fish rise, the thought would occur to him, from the rise of this fish, from the break of its ripples, from its speed, it is a small fish, not a large one. In the same way, one individual in discussion with another knows this. From the way this person rises to an issue, from the way he applies his reasoning, from the way he addresses a question, he is dull, not discerning. And then there is the case where one individual, through discussion with another, knows this. From the way this person rises to an issue, from the way he applies his reasoning, from the way he addresses a question, he is discerning, not dull. Why is that? He makes statements that are deep, tranquil, refined, beyond the scope of conjecture, subtle, to be experienced by the wise. He can declare the meaning, teach it, describe it, set it forth, reveal it, explain it, and make it plain. He is discerning, not dull. Just as if a man with good eyesight standing on a shore of a body of water were to see a large fish rise, the thought would occur to him. From the rise of this fish, from the break of its ripples, from its speed, it is a large fish, not a small one. In the same way, one individual in discussion with another knows this. From the way this person rises to an issue, from the way he applies his reasoning, from the way he addresses a question, he is discerning, not dull. It's through discussion that a person's discernment may be known, and then only after a long period, not a short period, by one who is attentive, not by one who is inattentive, by one who is discerning, not by one who is not discerning. Thus it was said, and in reference to this was it said. So I thought this is an interesting sutta in that it not only describes how a person can know another person's qualities through long-term association, not short-term association, and by being attentive and by being discerning oneself. And then also the actual four qualities that he mentions as good things to evaluate and know about somebody that you're wanting to spend time with, knowing their virtue, knowing their purity or their consistency of how they treat other people, knowing their endurance during adversity, and knowing their actual qualities of discernment as well. So that's another example of discernment. And I thought I would just end with a couple of other ones related more to the concept of anicca, inconstancy, is how Ajahn Jeff translates it. Just because that was the major reference in the Anodhi Sutta that we were talking about. It was specifically brought out as the contemplation of anicca sanya. Oftentimes you'll hear people primarily define wisdom as insight into the three characteristics, anicca, dukkha, anatta, or the Four Noble Truths. So this one is Venerable Nandaka in discussion with a group of bhikkhunis. Venerable Nandaka says, "Just as when the oil in a burning oil lamp is inconstant and subject to change, its wick is inconstant and subject to change. Its flame is inconstant and subject to change. Its light is inconstant and subject to change. If someone were to say, the oil in that burning lamp is inconstant and subject to change, its wick is inconstant and subject to change, its flame is inconstant and subject to change. But as for its light, that is constant, everlasting, eternal, and not subject to change. Would he be speaking rightly?" The bhikkhunis reply, "No, Venerable Sir." Why is that? Because the oil in the burning lamp is inconstant and subject to change. Its wick is inconstant and subject to change. Its flame is inconstant and subject to change. So how much more should its light be inconstant and subject to change? Venerable Nandaka says, "In the same way, sisters, if someone were to say, my 6 internal media are inconstant, but what I experience based on the 6 internal media, pleasure, pain, or neither pleasure nor pain, that is constant, everlasting, eternal, and not subject to change. Would he be speaking rightly?" "No, Venerable Sir. Why is that? Because each feeling arises depending on its corresponding condition. With the cessation of its corresponding condition, it ceases." Good, good. That's how it is for a disciple of the Noble Ones who has seen it as it has come to be with right discernment. Just as when the root of a great standing tree, possessed of heartwood, is inconstant and subject to change, its trunk is inconstant and subject to change, its branches and foliage, its shadow, is inconstant and subject to change. If someone were to say, the root of that great tree, that great standing tree, possessed of heartwood, is inconstant and subject to change. Its trunk, its branches and foliage are all inconstant and subject to change. But as for its shadow, that is constant, everlasting, and eternal, and not subject to change. Would he be speaking rightly? No, Venerable Sir. Why is that? Because the root, the trunk, the branches and foliage are inconstant and subject to change. So how much more should its shadow be inconstant and subject to change? In the same way, if someone were to say, my 6 external sense media are inconstant, but what I experience based on the 6 internal media, pleasure, pain, or neither pleasure nor pain, that is constant, everlasting, eternal, and not subject to change. Would he be speaking rightly? No, Venerable Sir. Why is that? Because each feeling arises depending on its corresponding condition. With the cessation of its corresponding condition, it ceases. Good, good. That's how it is for a disciple of the Noble Ones who has seen it as it has come to be with right discernment. describing the changeability and dependence, interdependence of conditions arising and ceasing. And lastly, 6 rewards. In seeing 6 rewards, it's enough for a monk to establish the perception of inconstancy with regard to all fabrications, without exception. Which 6? All fabrications will appear as unstable. My mind will not delight in any world. My mind will rise above every world. My heart will be inclining to unbinding. My fetters will go to their abandoning. I'll be endowed with the foremost qualities of the contemplative life. In seeing these 6 rewards, it's enough for a monk to establish the perception of inconstancy with regard to all fabrications without exception. That's from Anguttara Nikaya 6, 102. Lastly, from Majjhima Nikaya 62, Rahula developed the meditation of the perception of inconstancy. For when you are developing the meditation of the perception of inconstancy, the conceit, I am, will be abandoned. So, went on a little bit longer than I thought, but thought there was some, just demonstrating the range of what we talk about when we talk about discernment, all the way from asking the right questions to get started on the path, to finding the right people to associate with, to the development of insight leading to release. Any questions or comments?
Is there a reference in Buddhadhamma to the sutta in which Sariputta is talking about the difference between, was it consciousness and panya?
I have no idea if there's a reference in here about it. One would have to check in the index to see and do some research. I didn't come across it when I was just checking, but it's a big book. He was asking if there was a reference in Buddhadhamma. Into the book, in here, in this book itself. So like there would be some commentaries about it from Payutto. I think that's what you were asking.
That quote comes from Ajahn 43.
Yeah, oh, is that what you were looking for? Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were asking where in Buddhadhamma it was found. Oh, yeah, okay.
I think the focus on the impermanence and all that can, it can seem like a bit of a buzzkill, I think, to a buzzkill to the Westerners. It can seem like a downer, a morose way of looking at everything as impermanent and all, but I just think it's interesting because when the Buddha talks about the 6 kinds of household joy, joy based on regarding as an acquisition to acquisition of a form by the eye, etc., through the media, and then the renunciant joy, which is joy that comes from seeing those very forms as impermanent and subject to change. And that's true to my experience too, is like when you see through something and that detachment, there's a joy waiting there, or a release or something. I just think it's interesting to look at wisdom, in terms of all those things it's kind of connected with, especially like that joy, and also in terms of knowing another person's character, how the Buddha says that it's possible for a good person to know another good person, but for not a person of bad character to know a good person is impossible. And somehow similarly, like wisdom's connected to virtue in that way too. And it's just, it's a really rich subject.
Yeah, it is. There's a lot to it. And it's just the whole, aspect of, I had never heard the term buzzkill before, but it's I like it. But just that, just kind of underscores how, attachment to temporary pleasures, that attachment is or that wish for them is threatened by the idea that they're going to change, but that if we accept that the idea that it's not everlasting, that those are short-term, not long-term pleasures, then we let go of them and find something that's even better. So, and that just in its nature, also, why I appreciate Ajahn Jeff's use of the word, like the perception of impermanence or inconstancy rather than the characteristic of, so that it's not actually defining that all things as a characteristic are inherently changing, but more like use this as a contemplative strategy. When you use it as a contemplative strategy and actually see for yourself the arising and passing away, then you're not inclined to hold on to it. It's just a natural process to look for something that's more stable, and then eventually letting go of that as well. So as seeing it in that way, from that perspective, as a perception rather than a characteristic, is good fuel for contemplation and letting go and release. And that's a whole lot nicer than holding on to that which we can't hold on to.